Here it is, Jets fans, the day we've all been waiting for, Tuesday, April 25th. Welcome to NYJ Ground Crew. I am your host and crew chief, A.M. Pfeffer, and as always, reporting from somewhere in the Jets universe, joining us today, Johnny Jets.
Congratulations, Jets universe.
And of course, now that we are here in draft week, and now that we have the man on this side of the fence, it is time to bring in our first guest of the season number 2, and we are so happy to have him. He was here with us last year towards the end. He's here again from Jets Way Podcast, Lorenzo Lagares. Lorenzo, welcome to the show.
Appreciate you guys having me on. I was on last time. It was definitely a pleasure, so glad you guys invited me back, and yeah, can't wait to talk the Jets offseason.
Glad to have you again. And yes, I mean, you are joining us for an amazing day. And I want to say this before we even begin. Yesterday, I make the post, the social media post for this coming on today, right? I put your name on there. I'm putting it all in, and it's like, hey, Aaron Rodgers, not yet a Jet. I think I did it very early in the morning, and then within like 2 hours, there it was, the announcement, the trade. I haven't changed the I thought it was kind of funny just to keep it there, and of course, we'll do it on the back end. But it's done. It's over. It's happening. He's here. He's coming within the next couple of days, and we have a lot to unpack about it. So let's just get right to it. I want to break down first and foremost the draft capital. Obviously, we've all seen it ad nauseum, but you got to say it again. I got to put it out there so we're very clear about it. We're getting Aaron Rodgers, the number 15 pick, the number 170 pick. That's all coming to the Jets. What did we give up? The number 13 pick, the number 42 pick, the number 207 pick. That's all in this year's draft. And then next year, the conditional second rounder for 2024, which becomes a first rounder if, Lorenzo, I think you know what the if is. What happens? How much does Aaron Rodgers have to play?
65% of the snaps.
65%, not 66, not an exact 2/3, by the way. Somehow we settled on the number 65 plus, and then it turns into that first rounder, which everyone is expecting. If he plays 65% or over, at least everyone in Jets universe is expecting, that becomes a very low first rounder. Now, before we begin, I must say this as well. The smart people in the room, much smarter than me, certainly, will value this. This all comes out to attributing value of what we gave up for it. And they're saying, essentially, in any draft, you're looking at somewhere between the number 10 and 15 pick in the draft. And what I mean by that is the 13th, the 42, the 207, this condition, what we're giving up in our own draft capital and what we receive back, you balance it all out, and that somehow equates to somewhere between number 10 and number 15, pretty much in any draft, of round number 1. What do we think? Good deal? Good deal for the Jets, Lorenzo?
Personally, I think it's a great deal for the Jets. I mean, listen, we've talked about it as Jet fans. Like, we can't win without a quarterback. We can't win without a head coach. I know there's still questions about the coaching staff, but I'll definitely take Aaron Rodgers on this football team. I think we have a young team that has a lot of promise. And again, we finally have the quarterback. And at least for me, I'm very excited about what he can bring to this table, and hopefully it's a multi-year situation and not just a one and done. So I guess we'll all let it play out. But for me personally, I'm definitely excited.
Oh yeah, and I like to hear. And I'm gonna bring it back to you for a second. But I've been waiting patiently for this day. Johnny Jets has been in my own universe now for well over a year, and I'm thankful to the universe that he ever joined me on this journey. But I want to hear this man's thoughts. I've been waiting for this exact day. Aaron Rodgers, top 7 quarterback of all time. Johnny, you and I have spoken about it. Undoubtedly, he's in the top 7. He's here. He's coming to the building. He's putting on that uniform. How you feeling?
I feel great. It's a great day for Jets universe. The offseason, draft week, draft day, draft night, and this year getting Aaron Rodgers. It's all the Super Bowl for Jets universe, for New York Jets fans. We are always the Super Bowl champions of the offseason. Our former head coach Rex Ryan, every year would say before the season started that we've already won the Super Bowl. And apparently now the rest of the NFL and the rest of the universe agrees the Jets are Super Bowl contenders with Aaron Rodgers. Does it improve our quarterback play? It's a rhetorical question. Of course it does. He is one of the best of all time. The question is he strong enough to not be defeated by the New York Jets? The New York Jets have destroyed players as talented and as mentally tough as Aaron Rodgers. And, if they're 7 or 8 games into it and, they're 4-4 and the coach is the reason why, they've lost 2 of those games, and they cut to Aaron Rodgers on the sidelines and he just got a look on his face like he doesn't want to be there anymore, then we can see that he's defeated. Conversely, if they're 7-1, if Robert Saleh is making good decisions and winning games for his team along with the quarterback, if the offensive line is giving Aaron Rodgers time to play, then this team, it has the potential to go far into the playoffs. Time will tell.
Lorenzo, what do you think? Do you expect that, the Jets orbit, the negativity that has surrounded this franchise forever, to seep into Aaron Rodgers? Or is this guy rising about 39 years old, 17 years into the league, the most grizzled veteran, doesn't give an F about the media more than anybody else, plays him like a puppet string? He's probably the perfect guy to come to New York. Do you see the Jets sinking him? Or conversely, do you see him elevating this franchise as expected?
No, I think he's going to elevate it, honestly, personally, because I look back at the Tom Brady situation, him going to the Buccaneers, like that last pass he threw as a Patriot was an interception, lost in the playoffs. And he was very motivated to show people and to show the world that, he can still play quarterback at a very, at an older age. So I'm looking at a similar situation with Aaron Rodgers and how he can elevate this franchise. I still think we need to improve this team, especially the offensive line, to protect him because he's not as mobile as he used to be. But as of right now, on April 25th, I think we're in a really good spot, and I think he's going to elevate this franchise a lot. I mean, the Packers basically gave him away. They told him they didn't want him back on the team, and they wanted to move on with Jordan Love. So I think telling him that was definitely going to motivate him into being the best he could be.
I got a question about Aaron. A guy like this and having him on the team now. Okay, I mean, you're a young guy, still in college, as I understand, right?
I graduated, but I'm
congratulations, by the way. Congratulations on the graduation. But still, you're certainly a lot younger than Johnny and myself. And looking at a guy like Rodgers, how do you feel about rooting for him? Right? I mean, are there other, are there just a different mindset or a quarterback or somebody that you'd rather root for? Or is Rodgers okay? I mean, he has really been this polarizing figure these last 3 years. He's now an elder statesman. He's an older guy. He seems to be, from an old guard. He's the prototypical type of guy that a certain type of fan who follows the NFL, of an older generation will just love and talk about. I mean, he's throwback in that way. Are you a fan of his personally?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely a fan. And listen, like, I cheer for my football team and definitely just want to see wins. Like I've seen the likes of Zach Wilson, Chris Trevler, and Bryce Pett. Like I can name so many quarterbacks that I've had to endure over the past, over my Jets fandom, that honestly, I'm just excited that we have a quote unquote top 5 or top 2 quarterback in NFL history. And, I still think he has some juice left in the tank. And personally, I'm definitely a fan. I've watched him on the Packers for how many years now, and seen the countless comebacks and the playoffs and different things like that. So I just want that on my team. So just to answer your question, yeah, I'm definitely a fan of his.
Johnny, was this a good deal for the Jets?
It was a necessary deal.
Did we make a good trade? For what we gave up?
Those might be two different questions. I'll answer it to the best of my ability. It was a necessary trade for the Jets. The Jets were out of options at this point. We've discussed on this podcast that if this process had gone beyond the draft, that Woody Johnson, would fold and cave in and give the Packers what they want. It seems like Woody Johnson made the decision that he didn't want to even wait until beyond the draft, and he gave the Packers what they want. If the reports are to be believed, that's what had been holding up the agreement, was that Woody Johnson wanted some kind of clawback measure in case Aaron Rodgers retired or, so on and so forth. He did not get that. He gave the Packers what they want in the sense this 65% is really just if Aaron Rodgers gets to week 12 and he's not, injured, he's still playing, then the Packers get a number 1 round pick. I'm not an actuary, but it sounds to me like that's like a 98% likelihood. So the Packers wanted that first round pick in 2024, and that's what they got. So to me, the Packers won as far as that goes. But in terms of overall, do the Jets win having Aaron Rodgers? Time will tell. Does he have the ability to take a team to the playoffs and to the Super Bowl? Of course he does. Can he do it with this team? That depends on so many variables. Is Elijah Vera Tucker going to be as good a player as he was last year coming back from injury? Same for Breece Hall. Is Mekhi Becton not only going to play it down in the NFL ever again, but going to be at a Pro Bowl level? Is Robert Saleh for the first time ever going to win a game for the New York Jets because he is the head coach? All of these things on and on and on. If Aaron Rodgers is running for his life and is discontented, or just from, what can happen to anybody on any team, as it did to Aaron Rodgers in 2022. If he gets injured, if he hurts his thumb and he's playing, but he's playing at a depreciated level, then the trade looks terrible.
Sure. No, all of that. But interestingly enough, I mean, I think a lot of this leading up to, and then as we all waited, especially over the last month after he made his announcement on the McAfee show that his intention was to come to the Jets, it became this notion of who's going to fleece who. And it didn't have to be that, right? And it doesn't still have to be like, oh, did JD get the better of the Packers? Did the Packers get the better of the Jets, right? When a deal is made, it's often a good deal if it's a good deal for both sides. That's exactly what happened here, because this is what both teams needed to happen. And this ultimately is a good deal on both sides for that. Did the Packers get the better of the deal? Probably. They got the money that was insane and the contract that was insane off the books. They've got the distraction off the books. Obviously, the relationship had soured. He's gone. Love takes over, whatever it may be. And they got back a sizable amount of draft capital. I mean, we did give up a sizable amount of draft capital. But you know what? I mean, in the long run, it's okay to be just that one pick between number 10 and 15, considering what goes on. I mean, you look back at like the Jamal Adams trades. We fleeced the Seahawks in that trade. It was ridiculous what we got back for a safety, in a position and the way he plays a position that's even, being faded out in the NFL. That's a ludicrous pick. You're still talking about the number, one of the top guys of all time coming and playing the most important position with a chip on his shoulder, with the notion that you expect him to play a couple years. But really, what this is going to come down to more than anything else, forget the draft capital for a second. We have to talk contract. And as of this morning, there is not a contract or renegotiated contract on the books. The Jets took back that albatross of a contract. Again, it's expected to be renegotiated, but if it never happens, this, Woody Johnson said, we're okay with it. That to me is insane. That's bad for the Jets. So this is really where JD is going to make his money if he gets to renegotiate. But let's just talk about what this year entails, because on the outset, at least for this year, not so bad. There's a $58.3 million signing bonus. The Jets said okay to that. We're willing to pay that. The beauty is we get to pay that out over a number of years, and the cap hit over the next 2 years, $15.8 million this year. Although at the moment we only have $8.4 million in money, so we've got to renegotiate a lot of things and change up, which of course JD will do. And then next year in 2024, the cap hit becomes $32.5 million in 2024. Also not terrible, by the way, especially if you're talking about the fact that there's a lot of quarterbacks out there who are 40 million plus in cap hit. So all of that is fine. It's anything after that, right? It's if he retires, here's what you're on the hook for. It's what it looks like in 2025, 2026, how long he's playing. So we better renegotiate that contract. Lorenzo, do you think we get that done, or are we just willing to eat that contract?
No, I definitely think, based on what I heard and kind of what I feel, I think there's going to be some renegotiating. It seems like Aaron Rodgers kind of, he wants some more additions to this team, and obviously with his contract and the money he's owed and guaranteed, if he's getting all of that, or based on his old contract, like the Jets wouldn't be able to add more to this roster. And I think he's in a position where, he's received a lot of money throughout his career. I think he's trying to win, and do that as best as possible. So I definitely think we're going to come to a point where that's renegotiated.
Yeah, and that's a major advantage of the Jets. Johnny, do you feel the same way? And how long do you think he plays for us?
Well, I mean, hopefully he plays the entire 2023 season, and then all bets are off. If he can, then the team has the potential, provided he has the supporting cast around him to do something really special in 2023. Whether he's going to play in 2024, and it's possible that even Aaron Rodgers doesn't know. So time will tell on that point. I just want to add, in terms of the calculation of what the Jets actually gave up to get Aaron Rodgers, I think one does have to add in the third round pick that went to Cleveland, even though that pick did not go to Green Bay. That the Jets did give that up in order to have the second round to get to give to Green Bay. So I think that somewhere in the math,
you brought that up, because, and obviously we're gonna touch on the draft in a little bit. I mean, it's draft week. We're absolutely going to talk about that. But to your point, at the moment, no third round pick on the books, and that is huge, and ultimately what we gave up. But ostensibly, I mean, if you take a step back and just look at this, you're really saying, like, we gave up Elijah Moore and a conditional pick next year. I mean, yeah, we moved a couple of picks around in round one, but we essentially gave up this conditional potential first round pick next year and Elijah Moore. I think a lot, if you're just taking the 10,000 foot view, a lot of people, a lot of us Jets fans are happy with that. But the good news is the trade capital, it just doesn't pontoon our future. And that's huge, right? Because there's a lot of teams who did that and gave up for quarterbacks, or to move up in the draft, or to be part of whatever it may be. Like, you're really gambling with your future in that way. And the Jets in no way, shape, or form did that, right? We still have our first pick this year. We still have a second on the books. We've got a couple of good ones, after that, and we're still pretty high with a couple of the numbers that we have in the draft. And then next year, I mean, if you're giving up that first rounder, if it's 21 or higher, right? If you're somewhere between 21 and 32 next year, we're all going to take that. We're all going to live that. I mean, if it ends up being a top 10 pick and we lost out on that, you saw that happen to a lot of teams this year, right? Denver included, Cleveland included. I mean, that hurts. That stings. That'll really set you back, especially when you need that particular player. But the expectation is not going to happen, won't pontoon our future. And the money, right? Again, if we can renegotiate the contract, the cap hit for this year and next really isn't bad at all. Again, we will take that. I think we should ultimately be happy with that. But it does come down to, and I'm just going to ask you one more time, both of you, how long this guy plays. I think he plays at least 2, possibly 3 for us. Lorenzo, what's your number?
Yeah, I think it really depends. I'm going to go ahead and say 2 just to answer the question. But, let's just say, knock on wood, the Jets, come out as champions, are winning the Super Bowl. Maybe he goes off on that note. But, I'll definitely take that. I know you guys would too. But I would definitely say.
By the way, I would take it again if the contract and the retirement that he ultimately would go off into the sunset does not pontoon our future. Yeah. I would not trade the Super Bowl for the notion of like, hey, Aaron Rodgers brought us to the Super Bowl and he won the Super Bowl this year and then decided to retire and we're on the hook for whatever the ridiculous, ludicrous money is that we have to figure out for the next 4 or 5 years. I wouldn't take that. Johnny, would you take that?
Winning the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Of course.
That's
not only would I take it, that's the only thing. And I do think that congratulations have to go to Woody Johnson for, depreciating the expectations, lowering the expectations of, the majority of Jets universe. All this talk in the last 24 hours about, we're definitely going to make the playoffs. And if I get to have some enjoyment from my football team, to echo the words of Leon Hess, and, the Jets make a run in the playoffs, they win a playoff game, if we host a playoff game, or, even make it to the Super Bowl and lose, it doesn't matter about winning the Super Bowl. Well, it does matter about winning the Super Bowl. You bring in Aaron Rodgers to win the Super Bowl. And if you're going into a thing, well, all I want to do is, just get to the playoffs and be respectable this year. And then in 2024, we're really going to go for it. I think that that's the effect that Woody Johnson has had on the fan base, where it's not even about being champions anymore. It's just about not being a laughing stock.
Yeah. And look, I hear it and I respect it. I'm just going to go back on record and say I still would not take it. To me, if it's win the Super Bowl, retire with the current contract, wouldn't want it. Renegotiate it. Don't pontoon us. Don't kill us for 5 years plus after that, because it ain't going to be worth it, in my opinion. 2, 3, 4 years from now, we're looking down that barrel of a gun, or 5 wins or less with somebody else. Wouldn't want it. But I hear it and I understand it. And of course, I want to win the Super Bowl.
And just to add on, I think that whether Aaron Rodgers plays for the Jets in 2024 is whether the Jets hire the head coach that Aaron Rodgers wants them to hire for 2024.
I know you love throwing in your little barbs against Bobby Saleh. Johnny, I got to go.
Yeah, and I want to follow up with Lorenzo along those lines. So you mentioned, you made you brought up the example of Tom Brady going to Tampa Bay and bringing his pedigree and his leadership and his talent, and they won the Super Bowl that first year. Well, my counter to that would be, Bruce Arians was the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that first year. In the second year, the head coach was Todd Bowles, and they did not win the Super Bowl. It was a train wreck. And I think that if Robert Saleh does not demonstrate that he's, more of a Bruce Arians coach than a Todd Bowles coach, then that first year analogy doesn't hold up.
Now, one thing I want to give Saleh credit for, though, Bowles as a head coach, as a defensive coordinator, has wonderful defensive units. As a head coach, does not have a great history, including with the Jets, of having good defensive units when he's the head coach. Well, Saleh has shown that he can be at the helm of the team and still produce a top 5 unit, and that goes a long way now that Hackett is here and Rodgers is happy with that. Johnny, you're my favorite conspiracy theorist, literally my favorite, not just top 3. Number 1, I've got a good conspiracy for you. I've been thinking about it all night since the draft. And this, to me, was a season in the making for Rodgers, not just coming here to the Jets, although I think that's ultimately where he really wanted to be. And I'm going as deep as that in the conspiracy, but he didn't want to play for the Packers. Here's where I'm going with this, because he had lost all respect for them. Okay. This is an adult relationship. This is an adult guy. Again, he's in his late 30s. And he said to them, I want you to pay me this insane amount of money. I'm throwing, he and his agent conspired to put together this ludicrous contract, and the Packers said yes to it. He lost all respect for them right then and there. You're not on equal footing anymore together, right? And he was already thinking, I'm out the door. I'm going to retire, or I'm going to go play elsewhere, or whatever it is. And clearly he still wanted to play. He went to that darkness retreat, whatever it was. But and he knew what it cost them, because he could have been the guy like, hey, to your point, Lorenzo, I've made all the money already. I've done everything I've needed to do. Why don't I take a lesser contract like Brady did in later years and sign everybody else? Well, no, I took the most ludicrous contract in NFL history because the Packers gave it to me. It cost us the guy on our team that we actually tilted the field towards. Again, the Packers were not made to play for Aaron Rodgers in the past couple of years. The actual design of the offense was Davante Adams. Now he was gone. They had to get rid of him and get back draft capital for it. And he looked around and he was like, I can't respect you guys anymore. I can't look you in the eye. We're not on equal footing. You put me on a pedestal. That's what the Packers did to Aaron Rodgers. They put him on a pedestal. And I think because he's the type of guy, he's just looking for the Jets actually not to put him on a pedestal, not to kowtow to him. How does he play for 2 or 3 years? Equal footing, some sort of, back and forth and level of respect that like, hey, I'm here, you're making the right decisions, but I'm also making the right decisions, and we respect each other. I'll run with you for 3 years. Lorenzo, what do you think of that?
I mean, listen, I love that. And I think it's, I love that point because definitely to your point, like Davante Adams was that offense. And we all saw it last year, even when we played them. Like, this isn't the same Green Bay Packers that we once saw a couple of years ago. So if he's able to kind of have that mindset where he's, maybe taking less money, renegotiating that contract, then we're able to get, signed. First of all, we have to sign Quinnen Williams and sign other people as well. So
we will.
If he's able to do that, then, definitely all aboard on that. And, I'm definitely excited to see how he plays in this offense, especially with Garrett Wilson, coming in as that wide receiver one.
Yeah, no doubt. Johnny, you heard me rant. You inspired my conspiracy. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, to say that Aaron Rodgers took steps to get himself out of Green Bay, I think that's a legitimate statement to make. And, your conspiracy theory makes as much sense as any that I can think of. The conspiracy that I'm thinking of, that I've expressed on this podcast, which I think is the best case scenario for the Jets, is that Robert Saleh is not, the lousy, terrible, deficient head coach that he presented himself to be in key situations in the 2022 seasons, but he did those things by design in order to tank the season on orders of Woody Johnson, so they would be eligible to be on Hard Knocks this year, right? So if they make the playoffs last year, they can't be on Hard Knocks this year. So Woody Johnson orders Robert Saleh, say things like the playoffs are not what's important, the playoffs are a stretch, do not have your team prepared the last 3 games, on and on the one primetime game that you have where the whole world is watching against Jacksonville, play the most putrid, 58 minutes of football anyone's ever seen. If that all was a deliberate tank, and in fact, Robert Saleh is a competent head coach, well, then we'll see that this year. I think that's the best case scenario conspiracy theory that I can think of, that he's been playing dumb. A smart guy can pretend to be dumb all day long. I've done it most of my life. And I think that if that's what Robert Saleh was doing last year in his rookie year as head coach, and this year he comes out and he's Vince Lombardi, Bill Walsh, Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick all rolled into one, well, then, I'll be the happiest person in Jets universe.
By the way, especially if Aaron Rodgers, who we think we all think that he is, and the chip on the shoulder guy, and the absolute like, hey, I got to stick it back to the man. He's playing 2 years. Why? Because we all know the NFL gods will put in Green Bay on the schedule next year in 2024, the Jets traveling in a Lambeau field, and that alone should bring him back for that second year. I'm excited for that, no doubt. We spent a lot of time on Mr. Rodgers, but we did it well. Let's move on to number 2 in the room, our boy Zach Wilson. All right, I want to say this, and then I want to hear all your thoughts on him. I'm not advocating keeping him. I need to preface what I'm about to say by that, right? I still want him off the team. Again, just not a believer, not necessarily in him personally. This isn't coming at Zach Wilson or who he is, and we all know the type of guy that he is at this point and the things that he said and the level of maturity that he has. But I'm not trying, again, to just come at him personally. I'm coming at the idea of it's really hard. The annals of NFL history will show you that if you have certain traits, you're never going to overcome them. You're not coming back from them. And unfortunately, he's shown them in a very poor light. So I'm not expecting him to really become something in this league. However, if you're going to keep him, which is what's ultimately happening, this is by far the best of what it looks like. It really is. I mean, this is ultimately the best thing that could happen for the Jets, and part of the reason maybe they went out and made the play that they did to go get a guy like Aaron Rodgers. Because, again, barring, the injury we're all talking about, there is zero chance that Zach Wilson will usurp Aaron Rodgers in the ladder, right? Like, there's no conversation to be had. Or forget the injury. I mean, again, him just falling off a cliff and suddenly him turning 39 and 40, like he just loses 78.5% of his athletic ability. Like, it's just not happening, right? So there's no conversation, there's no concern. And Rodgers, who sat for quite a long time behind Favre, and this idea of a reset for Wilson, this will become a real reset. Now he's got the guy that he idolizes. Now he actually has the 2 more full years to sit behind him before we're even thinking about his 5th-year option, right? And that's what we're really looking for out of this guy. Before we have to make a decision, draft a couple more guys over the drafts in the later rounds and see if they pan out, whatever it may be. But yeah, I mean, the back, like, I'm fine with him being the backup now. I've thought more about it, and I'm like, okay, he can be the back. The idea is for Rodgers to play all of that. And if Rodgers goes down for a game or two, I'm fine with Zach Wilson coming in for a game or two. Again, there's zero conversation. I mean, some people in the media will try and have fun with it, especially if Zach Wilson comes in and does well or whatever it is. But it's just not going to happen, right? We know that's nowhere. We're not going with that in terms of like Rodgers being bad and Wilson being good, and now he should be the starting quarterback again. He's got the time. You can spend the time with him. You can fix everything that you possibly can. He can learn from Rodgers. He has 2 more years of maturity. That's a big thing, especially in your early 20s. Lorenzo, you might be able to speak to that. I think we all know, right? What it means every 6 months or every 12 months at the age that you are to really step up, stop wearing the headband, stop acting like he does. Like I'm just saying, Zach puts on that headband. Like there's just a connotation. The images of Johnny Manziel coming straight back to you, and it's like nobody wants that. And just say like, hey, you had your time. You didn't do it. We had to do what we had to do, but you're still on the team. This is the best of all worlds. Lorenzo, do you want him on the team, or would you rather see him gone?
I think at this point in time, I would rather him on the team because let's just say there's a trade in place or we end up releasing it, which is not going to happen. But like we're not going to get anything of value for Zach Wilson. And I think at that point, you might as well just keep him. Hopefully he's able to grow behind Aaron Rodgers, learn a little bit. And, I kind of wish, looking back on everything that, this kind of happened when Zach Wilson was drafted. Because out of college, he showed the arm talent, he showed the physical ability, but, playing at a smaller school, he still had things that he needed to learn. So hopefully he's able to get that now. So at that point, I'd rather just keep him. Hopefully he's able to grow. Like you said, he still has 2 more years left before we even think about that 5th-year option. So at that point, I'm going to keep him. But yeah, man, I think it was very interesting just to see his teammates really like push for Aaron Rodgers, and like no one even mentioned Zach Wilson or even mentioned him throughout this offseason, honestly. So I'm curious to see what that looks like for him in the next steps of like, mini camp and training camp and all those things. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to.
Johnny, before I throw it to you, I just want to add in one last thing. So hopefully you can take everything that I said and kind of add to it. The notion of Zach for a game or 2 coming in, I'd be fine with him. If it's anything longer than that, or it's like he's QB1 again, no, get the bridge quarterback, sign somebody off the street, whoever's available, trade, whatever you have to do. Don't want him, thinking about him being the guy at any time soon. Wouldn't want to see him on the field for at least a year. Go reset, go do what you can if there's any opportunity for you. Johnny, what do we think overall for Zach?
Right. So if as long as Joe Douglas is the general manager of the New York Jets, then Zach Wilson isn't going anywhere because they're tied together in that respect. If the Jets have a terrible season and Joe Douglas is let go, then Zach Wilson will probably be gone too. But to directly answer your question, if Aaron Rodgers has an injury by which they expect him to be back after 1 or 2 games, as opposed to being out for the year. Right. So if Aaron Rodgers gets injured and he just can't play anymore, then I don't see any reason not to play Zach Wilson because the season is over. But if Aaron Rodgers is coming back after a game or 2, that 1 or 2 games could be the difference between winning the division, having a home playoff game, making the playoffs, even if it comes down to that. And to put that in the hands of Zach Wilson, when you've had Aaron Rodgers for X number of games, let's call it 7 games, it's week 8, and he's going to play weeks 8 and 9. He's going to be terrible, and the fans are going to boo him like crazy, and he'll be held responsible for the the season being a failure. And I don't think that he should be the backup. I think they should have another backup who's ready to come in and be serviceable in that situation.
Okay, I like that, but I'm not so sure he's going to be terrible. And we've talked about this before, and I know you don't love when I say it because I can see it on your face, but I've got to say it again. The NFL coaches and the executives love experience. Experience means the world to all of these guys, right? Who has seen the field in a starting caliber and who's done it a number of times? Well, that's Zach Wilson. There's a lot of backups in this league who've only played X amount of snaps, or you've seen him for half a game, whatever it may be. Zach Wilson has starting experience, too much starting experience, as we all know, but he still has starting experience. That means the world to them, right? So now he's going to go through an entire offseason being the number 2 guy. He might go through 6, 8, 7, whatever you said in how many games, right? Game 8, whatever it is, before he has to come in and step in for a game or two. And maybe at that point, he might not be as terrible as we're making him out to be. Again, he's got a long way to go to fix a lot of issues, and hopefully we don't see them or even hear about them for a year, maybe 2, to see how he's doing, and we could check in him on then. But yeah, I'm not as worried. Lorenzo, we'll end with you before we move on here. Does his experience mean anything to you to be the backup, or does that not mean much at all to you?
To me, it doesn't mean as much. Because back to Johnny's point, even last season, we were going with Mike White, and obviously he got injured, and we had to play Zach Wilson because we didn't have anybody else. And, he got booed off the field and got replaced by the 4th-string quarterback. So I think to your point, I'm not really ready to see him for multiple weeks, to be honest with you. So I think
years.
I think he needs a full year to just reset, kind of really sit down and learn. And then we'll take things, year at a time. But yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I don't think his experience means as much in that sort of sense.
Yeah, an expensive reset to be sure. Let's see who else is coming. Let's go down the receiver room right now. Garrett Wilson. I mean, come on now, right? Fantasy owners, especially those who have keeper leagues everywhere, are just, absolutely beyond themselves with excitement. He should really be a major player this year. Certainly, Allen Lazard is here. I'm happy to see him personally. I think he's great. He's a big target. He stretches the field. And, you see some of those passes where Rodgers just lays it in there and he makes those catches. It's so awesome. Corey Davis, the great run blocker, as we know, it seems like he's sticking on this team. I don't know. We're certainly going to renegotiate his contract. He's got to be a big part of how we're making room for Rodgers. But my guess is he's not going anywhere. I don't think he's got a huge market outside of us. I could be wrong about that. So he will renegotiate. We'll pay him in that $7 or $8 million range, which is still a lot for him, but he's a big target. You could see him bump in value for sure. Mecole Hardman, right? All the gadget plays, although he doesn't want to just be that guy. He's a yards after catch machine, and he can return kicks. I mean, that's 4 great receivers right there. And then you've still got Denzel Mims on there. I mean, he's an athletic marvel, but, there's a lot of question marks with him still. I still want him to see him 5th on the depth chart, but even in an Aaron Rodgers run offense, 5th on the depth chart could mean a lot. Maybe he sticks. What else do we need? Who else is coming? What do we think, Johnny?
I think the wide receivers is perhaps the least area of need on this team. And I think between them and the players that you listed and, the 2 prominent tight ends that the Jets have, and also the receivers that can catch the ball out of the backfield, I think that the passing game in that respect is in good shape.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Lorenzo, what do you think? Do we need more wide receiver? Are you happy with who we've got? Are you super happy with who we have?
I'm definitely happy with who we have in terms of just like wide receivers, tight ends. I would like to add maybe a younger wide receiver, potentially later in the draft, because I think we still need some speed, and bearing any injury, I'm not really looking forward to seeing Denzel Mims taking starting reps, if I'm being honest. So I would just still like to add, maybe one more body in there. But
do you want a big body? You want a big body, or you want the twitchy guy who can play the kind of that slot and be everywhere and just absolutely beyond? Just to your point, speed.
I think definitely speed, because I think in terms of, I think we have our 2 bigger body receivers, potentially 3 with Allen Lazard, Corey Davis, and obviously Denzel Mims. So I think if we could add like a twitchy guy or just someone being versatile. Someone with a lot of speed, I think I would definitely love to add that.
Yeah, Mecole Hardman certainly fits the bill, but you need someone behind him as well. No doubt about it. There's room for one more guy, and I agree with you. I would love to think that we're going to spend that pick, and we're going to get there in a second. But let's just fill it out. And Johnny, you kind of alluded to it, right? The tight end room: Tyler Conklin, CJ Uzomah, and Conklin has proven to be a pretty good pass catcher. I think he's going to be a wonderful, have a wonderful year with Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball, and that's exciting. And Uzama's probably going to have a little bit better of a year. But, where he's got to improve is our blocking and why we have him there and all of that, obviously. But look, Rucker is an interesting play. I mean, can this guy suddenly see the field? You go back and look at the tape on the Miami game. He was the best player in the field for the offense, which was insane. I mean, seriously, go back and watch what he did. Watch actually how he blocks, how he was part of plays, how he catches. I mean, there's some excitement with him, and now he has that rookie year out of the way. Could he suddenly step into a role and be a little bit better? And then there's Kenny Yeboah, right? I mean, he's still on our team. I think this is his 4th year in the league. Like, that's a lot of time to learn the position. I mean, we don't need necessarily to go out there and waste another draft pick on this or pick somebody up. We already have that room filled out. Breece Hall, Michael Carter, Bam Knight, Ty Johnson. Those are four great names, especially if Michael Carter could just even come back 20% more than what he was. And obviously Breece, it looks like he's ready to go for the season. And to your point, Johnny, about catching out of the backfield, I mean, you've got a serious offense. So this comes down to the offensive line. Johnny, we're going to start with you. We just signed Connor McGovern. We signed him yesterday or 2 days ago, and then we make the trade, right? I mean, that'll tell you everything. Like, we figured out the pivot position. We've talked about him before. He's Mr. C+, B-. You're not really getting less than C+ out of him, and you're never going to get more than B- out of him. That seems to be who he is. Is that enough to get it done at the pivot, or what? Are you still majorly concerned about the offensive lineman? I'm going to answer for you, yes, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, I mean, moving down from 13 to 15, puts the Jets at an added disadvantage in terms of getting one of the offensive tackles that they had identified as being in the top tier in this draft. It's quite possible that they've traded out of the ability to get that player at 15. That would indicate that Joe Douglas, as he has done in the past, is open to trading down to get additional picks. And then they'd have a draft pick in either later in the first round or another second round pick. In that situation, would they take a center? It's quite possible. They need extreme help on the offensive line, if only for depth. Even if you are going to, say as a given that Elijah Vera Tucker and Mekhi Becton are going to be good to go opening day. Elijah Vera Tucker got injured last year, and Mekhi Becton has been injured multiple years. So to have added depth on the line of not just random nondescript, scrap heap kind of players on, as the depth, but having actual, players that can play the position, that's essential to this team.
Agbui's back. We re-signed him the other day. I think that was pretty big. I think he started something like 7 or 8 games for him, and I hope I'm not butchering his name. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. Cedric Agbui, but I could be wrong about that. Lorenzo, how concerned are you about our offensive line? Before we get into the draft, and we're about to leapfrog into it in just a moment, where are you at with our offensive line at the moment?
Yeah, I still think we're in a position where we're going to end up taking a center or quote unquote center for the future. I think Connor McGovern was a nice depth piece just to have somebody who's, been in this offense before and kind of has that continuity with the offensive line. But I still don't think we have those 2 tackles nailed down. I mean, yes, we have Dwayne Brown back, but he's a little bit older as well. And obviously Max Mitchell had the blood clots, and Mekhi Becton hasn't been healthy for 2 years now. So I think in this draft, we definitely have to take at least 1 or 2 tackles and potentially a center. So
I think 2 tackles. All right. Well, let's talk about the draft. Let's break down what we've got. Number 15 now in round 1. And to your point, Johnny, yeah, I mean, all of a sudden the Packers leapfrog us. They may very well take an offensive lineman. I mean, more than likely they're going to take the receiver, but they could take an offensive lineman. Certainly the Patriots, who are now just 1 step ahead of us, they've got to be eyeing one of those offensive linemen. So the blue chippers are going to be off the table. Number 43 in round 2. Number 112, the 112th pick in round 4. To your point, we talked about it. Number round 3. Number 143 in round 5, and now also number 170 in round 5, part of the trade that we just had for the Packers. I'll go through that again. Number 15, number 43, number 112, number 143, and 170. So at the moment, only 5 draft picks on the table. He has shown, talking about JD now, the capacity to trade down. Let's just start with this. Do you want to see a trade down, or would you rather see him just pick at 15? Johnny?
I think it's dependent on what's there at 15. If one of these, blue chip offensive linemen are there, in my view, it's a no-brainer. You got to take that player. If they're off the board and, there isn't a player that they feel is, let's say number 3 on their board and they can get them at 15, then I think the move has to be to trade down and recoup some picks.
Lorenzo?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think if your guy's there at 15, you just go ahead and take him. But I personally, I think there's about four offensive linemen or four offensive tackles rather that might be available at that position. I think Broderick Jones specifically, or like Darnell Wright, those two guys will probably be names that will probably be taken in that range. So I think if one of those two guys are there, you just go ahead and take them. But again, if they're taken, definitely trade back and kind of recoup some of the draft picks that we traded away.
Look, I'm going to say this. Johnny's heard me talk about the fact that I'm bigger on the need on the defensive line as our big pick more than the offensive line, because I think you can get some guys who are going to matter, especially that they're not necessarily stepping in right away. It's not that you're taking this left tackle who has to step in. Dwayne Brown is there. You're paying him $10 million. Aaron Rodgers knows this and is excited that Dwayne Brown, who's actually good in pass protection, not so good in run, the run game anymore because he can't move like he used to. But for the most part, he's protecting his blind side. And I think Rodgers is happy about that. The idea and the thought process is Mekhi Becton is coming back to claim back that starting position. Max Mitchell's in his second year. How much stronger is he? Are the blood counts okay? And when he was in there were times when he was serviceable, and he certainly expected to be a lot better in the second year. So this notion that the Jets are just so hard up to get some offensive lineman who has to be immediate plug and play, I don't agree with it. And I want to throw something else out there. This notion of blue chippers, okay? I'm not so sure any of these guys are as blue chip as we're talking about. Skronsky is, as we know, probably the best guy in the draft, but he's got the problem with short arms, and he's probably going to kick inside at least for year one. Doesn't do us any good. So Paris Johnson, some of the numbers on him and some of the important metrics, a little bit questionable, though. He has the versatility to play all over the offensive line, and he probably will be good. Broderick Jones is raw. I mean, this guy's raw, which is why you're seeing DeJuan Jones, scream up the board. And I believe, if I'm saying his name right, Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma is a possibility. You can get him later on. You can even get some of these guys or someone you need in the top of the second round. To me, trading down is not only the play, it's the absolute play. You have to recoup one of these picks because, I mean, here's our needs. Offensive lineman is still a need, and I'm not I'm not saying that we don't need it, and probably two of them, and probably, to your point, Johnny, some other center of the future who's going to come in, which you usually don't get in the first round anyway, right? Like, that's just not usually you see. It's a second and third round position, but we need offensive linemen. We certainly need a tackle, and there's opportunity to take the tackles. I mean, for us, because there's other teams who are not necessarily going to need it, and there are, forget the term blue chippers, but there's 6 or 7 deep in this draft that's going to probably fall to us if we're in the top 20 picks, top 20, 22 picks. One of those guys will be there, and we should be happy about it, where we're not necessarily reaching for him. Or even in the top of the second round, especially if we go defensive lineman, especially if Kalijah Cansey is there. Man, I want that guy on our team. I want him in the middle. I'm such a fan of who he is, and I think he'd be great for us. We need that defensive lineman. We need a linebacker. We need a safety. And probably, to your point, Lorenzo, we need that wide receiver. But we could take that in the round 5, and JD knows this. We're using one of those picks, I have to assume, in round 5 on that twitchy wide receiver we're talking about to fill out the room. Which, again, if we can make that trade, round 1, you move down and suddenly you've got another guy in round 2, or even if you're low enough in round 1, you're probably going to recoup a third-round pick for it, not necessarily a second-round pick for it. So maybe higher in round 3, but you've got round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, and then 2 in round 5, and then JD's got to nail his draft. Johnny, we've been talking about it. He crushed it last year. We know that. But even more important is him crushing it this year. You got to go back-to-back and hit on 4 of the 6 guys or 3 of the 5 guys that you're ultimately going to take in a big, big way. Lorenzo, do you agree, or are we going to be okay if some of these guys get to sit for a bit?
No, I think, and to your point, like, I definitely agree with all the needs that you mentioned. But I think we need to still, again, hit this draft, on the head, because, again, we're in a 1 to 2 year window here. Like, it's not time to, for major mistakes or things like that. So I definitely trust Joe Douglas, though, and his staff. I think, for the past 2 drafts, they've definitely taken some really good players, some blue chippers, and some guys that'll be on this team for a long time. So I think, me personally, I have a lot of trust in, their process for this draft.
Yeah. Johnny, what do you think? I mean, do you expect him to hit the home run again in this draft? Does he need to hit the home run, or are we going to be okay if he just fills a couple of different needs throughout these 5 or 6 guys that he's going to pick up?
Well, if Joe Douglas does not have a great draft, then that's really going to hurt the Jets. Not just this year or next year, or however many years Aaron Rodgers is here, but over the next 5 years. So it's not acceptable in any situation. I have a fundamental difference of opinion with you, AM, about what wins championships in the National Football League in this day and age in Roger Goodell's league. it's offense, offense, offense. Now, you can talk about the regular season and getting enough wins to get into the playoffs. But once the playoffs start, at least in the last 2 or 3 years, clearly, defenses are forgiven for giving up 30, 40, 50 points in a playoff game. They're quote unquote gassed by the time the fourth quarter or overtime comes around. So you have to have an offense that's high powered. You have to have an offense that can score 30, 40, 50 points in the playoffs to win the championship. And if the quarterback is running for his life or is getting killed because the offensive line is either just not good enough or is injured enough that it's just not good enough because of that, then they're not going to be able to score. Or they're not going to be able to win playoff games. So last year, you talked about a center not going in the first round. Last year, a center did go in the first round, Tyler Linderbaum to the Ravens, 1 pick ahead of where the Jets traded up to take Jermaine Johnson. The Ravens traded up 1 pick ahead to get that center, Tyler Linderbaum. The Jets last year felt that the value of Jermaine Johnson on the defensive side of the football was the guy that they were targeting for trading up rather than going for a need that they still have, that Tyler Linderbaum would now be in year 2 to fill. Okay. So, I just think that adding a defensive player, I just don't think that defenses win championships in the National Football League. I think that that's been the trend for a long time, ever since Roger Goodell took over. And certainly, as I said, in the last few years, the amount of points scored in the playoffs and certainly in the Super Bowl have been, greatly increased.
I want to qualify something here because I don't think we're as far off as you think we are. In fact, I think we're in total alignment. And let me explain why. Couldn't agree more with you, and you are forgiven for giving up those points if you ultimately do that, although we are set in the secondary, especially at the cornerback position. If these guys can even show up to 80% of what they did last year, we'll still be phenomenal, right? I'm talking about our 2 big corners and certainly Michael Carter in the slot. What I'm talking about is the notion that you need to get off the field, and we don't have a run stuffer. You have to have someone in the middle of that defense. You have to have a defensive lineman that matters where they're not eating clock. If you're putting up 30 or 40 points a game, a lot of that happens in big chunk plays. Fine, you're giving up those big chunk plays, and then you've got to match that on the offensive side of the ball. Well, now we have the firepower to do that. I'm talking about the eating of clock, the situational football. And if you're letting runs happen at 3, 4, 5, 6 yards at a chunk through the tackles, you're dead in the water. You've got to get the offense back on the field. That's why it's important. So I'm glad that we're not in the position in the top 10 to have to waste that defensive lineman and take a guy like Quincy or somebody else to really do something like that. But if you get a guy who's bottom of the first round and you're still taking those tackle positions and still getting good value for them at the top of the second, right? And because, and Tyler Linderbaum aside, because he is that one amazing blue chipper. You're just not seeing most centers go in the first round, and you're certainly not even being here. Nobody's even talking about them this year to go in the first round. So, and that's really what most years are. And again, we are in alignment. We are in agreement on that. This is an offensive league. This has to be played as an offense. That's why it's so exciting. Rodgers is here. That's why we have, suddenly these players that matter and guys on our side of the ball that are exciting. And that's why I wanted to list all those guys, especially our running back room, who I freaking love. But you have to have a run stuffer to get us off the field and make it matter and put up those 30, 40 points a game and don't let the clock get eaten up. Let's talk about odds. This is exciting. I'm going to throw out a number. Minus 400. Lorenzo, what am I talking about? What's minus 400 mean to you?
Ooh, minus 400. Definitely not Super Bowl odds.
Not Super Bowl odds, but playoff odds. Minus 400 to make the playoffs. Wow. I think we were like minus 160 with the expectation that Rodgers is coming now that he's here. Minus 400 to make the playoffs. In the AFC. The AFC is in an arms race and has been for the past 3 years. It's way better than the NFC. We know that for the most part. I mean, the Eagles notwithstanding, right? Or the Niners notwithstanding. But for the most part, and especially the AFC East, we're minus 400 to make the playoffs. Johnny, what does that mean to you as a long-standing, suffering Jets fans?
Oh, I mean, it doesn't mean anything. The only thing that matters to me is the product on the field, and we'll see what happens when the real games start. But as far as how the Jets are being viewed by Las Vegas or by the public at large, obviously adding Aaron Rodgers to the team, makes them more of a competitor than they were without Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, I mean, I think that if there's anyone there that's offering a prop bet of who will get more MVP votes in 2023, Aaron Rodgers or Elijah Moore, I would like to put some money down on Elijah Moore, because this is either going to go great for the New York Jets or it's going to be a train wreck, and we're just going to be seeing Elijah Moore scoring 25 touchdowns for the Brownies.
Oh man, God, I love it. I love that. I mean, you pulled that out, and you know what? I'm happy to take that bet, and I'll give you odds. Let's talk about some more odds for a second. Here are the teams above the Jets to win the Super Bowl. I'm talking about winning the Super Bowl before we even start. The Chiefs, the Niners, the Bills, the Eagles, the Bengals. That's it. Short list, man. Five teams. That is it, because the Jets and Cowboys are equal to each other in. By the way, Lorenzo, if you're there, we lost you. You may have been kicked out the mute or the video. I don't know if you got to reboot, but I'm going to keep going anyway. At the time, the Jets and Cowboys, some version of plus 1,400 to plus 1,600 to win the Super Bowl. Here's who we're better than.
Right, and that could be determined by Zach Wilson playing that night game Thanksgiving.
I mean, again, I think we all get that. I think we all get that. But even still, like, here's who we're better than, and we're talking about playoff teams from last year: the Chargers, the Dolphins, the Lions, the Jaguars, the Ravens. We're way better than the Packers, who are plus 5,000. Again, we're somewhere in between 1,400 to 1,600. The sixth team tied with the Cowboys, the Dak Prescott-led Dallas Cowboys, to win the Super Bowl, and those pesky Patriots. They're in the bottom 8, man, plus 6,000 or worse. So for once, and I get it, and it's not a lot to just throw at and feel like that means too much, but it does mean something. It does mean something that Vegas, who obviously knows a lot and doesn't lose money because the public does, not Vegas for the most part when it all shakes out. 5 teams, 5 incredibly good teams that everybody's going to talk about in the power positions who are above the Jets to win the Super Bowl. We're equal with the Cowboys. Johnny, does that mean anything to you?
No, again, it doesn't. I mean, not in terms of, the success of the team. It's, winning the Super Bowl is the only thing that matters to me. As I've said for a million years, Jets fans are like Yankees fans. You either win it all or the season is a complete failure. And, whether we're getting some sort of bromide from Las Vegas that it's minus 400 to make the playoffs this year, we'll find there's now, 7 teams make the playoffs in each conference. It's not as difficult as it once was to make the playoffs. So it's conceivable that the Jets win 9 games and they make the playoffs this year. I think that, the what's going on here is that it's, people are drinking the Kool-Aid. People are jumping on the bandwagon that the Jets, now that they have Aaron Rodgers, that, enough of their problems, if not all of their problems, are solved. And, it's almost a given that they're going to make the playoffs and, they're going to be contenders for the Super Bowl. And, they could even make the title game or the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl. I'm not convinced of any of that is going to happen. It's more likely with Aaron Rodgers. I think barring injury to Aaron Rodgers, I think the Jets are definitely in a position where it's a playoff spot is theirs to lose. Now, who would lose that for the Jets? I think it would be the head coach, Robert Saleh. But, to make the playoffs minus 400, I would, I just don't, I think there's too many question marks. You've spoken to, all the talent that's coming back on the offensive line. But, if 3 or 4 of those players are sitting on the bench because they're injured, then, Aaron Rodgers has no one to protect him, and the Jets could go on a 5-game losing streak.
Lorenzo, we don't have video, but are you still there with us? Audio?
Yeah, I'm still here. Had a little bit of technical difficulties, but I can hear you guys and everything.
We'll take your voice. So bring us on home here. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Again, we are equal to the Cowboys and only 5 teams ahead of us to win the Super Bowl. Do you believe the hype? Are you excited about it? And where's your money going?
I'm cautiously optimistic. I would put it. I think definitely love the odds and how Vegas and how everybody views us. I just think it's still late April. There's still a lot of things to happen before we even step on the football field, and obviously football is a big injury sport. So a lot of things can happen in between now and January. So I would just say I'm cautiously optimistic about everything. But in terms of just adding Aaron Rodgers and obviously the draft is this week, I'm definitely excited about, what we have in store. And to Johnny's point, I definitely think it's all dependent on Robert Saleh and the coaching staff, because I definitely think they lost us some games last year, and they're definitely inexperienced in terms of how many years they've coached. So if we're all on the same page on that, I think, everything can go well, but definitely still a lot of time and a lot of footballs to be played before we get to the playoffs and things like that.
Parting words, Johnny, bromide, phenomenal. If you don't know what it means out there, look it up. Lorenzo Lagares from Jets Way Podcast. We are so appreciative of you coming back. This has been a good one. It is April 25th, 2023 BCE, and Aaron Rodgers is officially coming to the New York Jets. It's happening. For Johnny Jets, for Lorenzo, I am AM Pfeffer. This has been NYJ Ground Crew, and a hell of an episode. We did almost an hour on this. I'm looking forward to next Tuesday. Goodbye, Jets. Jets Universe.
We're Super Bowl champs, Jets Universe.
Plus 1,400. Talk to you guys. Thanks again.